By God, I can't believe it either. You're looking at the title, you're probably just as surprised as I am. I can't believe I'm about to put these words together in a sentence, but Lil Uzi Vert is finally here with his second studio album, Eternal Atake. Wow, the wait for this thing has been something. Everyone knows that, everyone's been talking about it, and now it's time for me to throw my hat in the ring and talk a little bit about the record. For those that may not know, Lil Uzi Vert is a rapper from Philadelphia, which is where I'm from, represent, who was a very big figurehead in the 2015 to 16 rise of SoundCloud rap. Some people have called it mumble rap, some people have called it SoundCloud rap, whatever you want to call it. He's been one of the big figureheads of it. I remember first hearing this guy back in 2016 when I heard the track 7 AM, and he continued to put out several big viral mixtapes like The Perfect Love Tape, Lil Uzi Vert versus the World. He had a number of very viral singles like Money Longer, You Was Right, P's and Q's, and of course in 2017 the big one, EXO Tour Life, which became his first Billboard Hot 100 Top 10 single, and it led into his debut album Love Is Rage 2, which, if I'm not mistaken, I believe became the first SoundCloud rap album to get to #1 on the Billboard 200. Again, I'm not 100% sure, but the point is he was really leading the charge of that movement of SoundCloud rap. And given that he's continued to see a lot of commercial success even without a big project in the last 3 years, you can see that his influence is still very much being felt and that people are still checking in to see what he's putting out. Now, I remember I reviewed Love Is Rage 2 when it came out in 2017. It was one of my first reviews, so obviously it wasn't very detailed. And I also did a review of the 4 bonus tracks that he released later on in the year. You could check out the review of the album as well as the bonus tracks in the link in the description, but at the time I thought the record was just okay. It did grow on me quite a bit after my first listen to it, but I will say that I still found it to be a bit spotty, a bit too lengthy, and for as many great tracks as there were on there, there were a few that I was just not that crazy about. But still, despite the inconsistency, the highs from that album were tracks that I continue to listen to a lot. So naturally, I was pretty interested to see where Uzi was going to go with this one, but then all the drama ensued. For those that may have missed out on it, for a long time, Uzi was not able to release this project, even though he claimed on several occasions that he was finished with it, thanks potentially to label intrusion from DJ Drama and Don Cannon, which apparently was so bad that in 2019, Uzi had mentioned that he was planning to quit music and that he deleted everything. Of course, that didn't come true because now we finally have the album. But before the release of the album, we did get a lot of singles from Lil Uzi, like New Paddock, Free Uzi, That's a Wreck, and Sanguine Paradise, just for some examples. And then Uzi really began to hype up this album with the Futsal Shuffle 2020 single as well as That Way. And now the album is finally here. It's 18 tracks and an hour long with only one feature on it, that being Sid on the track Urgency. So again, it's definitely pretty lengthy, and I was very interested because with all of those singles, I wondered just how many, if any, were going to make the track list. I obviously knew Futsal Shuffle and That Way were going to. He was kind of hyping them as singles for the album. But it turns out the other 4, New Paddock, Free Uzi, That's a Wreck, and Sanguine Paradise, were all excluded from the album. And even the 2 singles that he said would be on the album were technically just listed as bonus tracks. Very confusing, I've gotta say. But still, I was honestly pretty excited going into this because while I had mixed feelings about a bunch of the non-album singles, I was very impressed with Futsal Shuffle 2020. The electronic and somewhat futuristic production, as well as Uzi's constantly changing fast pace and catchy flows, made it feel like the first song that really fit the themes that Uzi was going with the album, like the whole futuristic space concept. And That Way was a fun single too. I loved the interpolation of the Backstreet Boys' I Want It That Way. It could have made the song terrible, but it was actually pretty fun, and I think Uzi's vocals were goofy but still very catchy. So as much as we were kept waiting for this thing, I was still interested going into it. And what did I get out of it? Well, I'll say this much. If you're expecting Eternal Atake to be album of the year material, I'm sorry, but I can't really say that I think it is. Fortunately, if you're expecting that the long delays would have a huge negative impact on the music, I can say that it doesn't. This album, for me at least, lands safely into that middle point of not amazing but not terrible. It's a fine record. It'll satisfy Uzi's diehards that have been waiting so long for it. And while it's not the most consistent record in the world, there's quite a bit here that you can take away and rock with in the future. Production-wise, there are quite a few tracks here that take on a somewhat more futuristic space epic-like sound compared to his previous stuff. You'll know that having heard a track like Futsal Shuffle 2020, which like I said takes takes the trap sounds and infuses a cool, glossy electronic sound to make for a complete banger. You Better Move is also another example. The song literally samples sounds from the Space Cadet 3D pinball game that used to appear on Windows XP and Windows 2000 computers. No, there aren't super deep lyrics on this thing or on the album as a whole, but I can commend this song for the quirkiness of its instrumental that helps make it a really intoxicating listen. I'm Sorry is another track with some clever production. It's an emotional sounding song that uses some of the electronic sound to play into the emotional themes, and Uzi's vocals do fit well on the song too. Celebration Station also sounds very similar to that track, and I like how plucky the production feels. A lot of the background sampling is compelling too, and I like the twists and turns that the production takes on the song Bust Me. Uzi's changing flows and performances are cool, even though the refrain from that song can get a bit sour at points. Still, that's SEPTA shout out though. Being from Philly, I like that. I was also really impressed with the track Urgency, a song that sees Uzi moving into a bit more of an R&B feel, with some more heavenly instrumentals that I think play well to not only his vocals, but also to Sid's, who shines very bright as the only feature on this album. Uzi to me has always been one of the SoundCloud rappers that I think had the most personality, and he shows that a lot here. I did notice that a number of the tracks rely on faster flows from Uzi, which I don't really have much of a problem with. Perfect example being the lead-off track Baby Pluto, which sees Uzi just rapid firing a lot of flows, but I think they work really well. I like how his cadences are constantly switching up, his vocal inflection is also ever-changing, and he brings a lot of personality on the song. Those vocals also mesh well with the sparse, spacey, and emotional piano-driven production too. Low Main is a track that feels like something I could have seen Uzi putting out back in like 2016, but again, I love the carefree sound of his vocals. He brings his typically goofy charm with the track, and it works over this instrumental that sounds kind of celebratory and grand. And while I wouldn't call it a highlight from the album, I do like some of Uzi's slightly higher register vocals on the Chrome Heart Tags track. They feel sticky even if the instrumental in the background doesn't equal up to that. And Prices is a track that makes a lot out of Uzi's vocals as well. He sounds really solid up against an instrumental that samples Travis Scott's Way Back. I wasn't really crazy about that track when I reviewed Birds in the Trap Sing McKnight, but I think the sample is used nicely here, and Uzi's hook is very immediate, very catchy, works really well for the song. However, Uzi to me, like I said, has always been inconsistent. Even with Love Is Rage 2 being an album that grew on me, there are still several tracks the album could have very well done without, and given that there's 18 here, I think that rings true with this record. There are some cuts that I'm just really not that crazy about. Silly Watch is an example. I feel like Uzi's flows can get pretty repetitive. The kind of offbeat feel of the song combined with the darker pianos feels like something I could hear out of someone like DaBaby, and I feel like it's definitely a track the album could have done without, with one of the only reasons it's remotely interesting being that Uzi kind of lays a small shot at Playboi Carti, who he doesn't seem to have a good relationship with anymore. Pop is a track that I also think is a mess and could have easily been chopped from the track list. Uzi rapid fires his flows, but forget about rapping off beat, it literally sounds like he was rapping for another instrumental, but somehow his vocals got put over this one. Those flows and the hook do get pretty repetitive. I think it's just a track that really needed to go back to the drawing board. Homecoming is an easily skippable one, especially because it does sound so similar to a number of the tracks that surround it, really only being memorable because of Uzi having fun with the vocals. And while it's not a huge low light, Bigger Than Life feels very standard up against some of the other tracks and doesn't really do a whole lot to serve as a standout. Same goes for the track Venetia, which isn't terrible. I like the instrumental here, but the hook is very weak, and given that there are some really catchy ones on this album, this one just doesn't stick out to me. The one thing that unfortunately sticks out is the awfully dated I Can Make a Gay Girl Turn to a Straight lyric. Secure the Bag is also a deep cut that feels like a total throwaway. The instrumental is far more bland than anything else that's here, and Uzi's slow triplet flow that rarely switches is just very tiring and very repetitive. And I was also very disappointed by the closer to the album, P2, which is obviously called that because it's a part 2 of EXO Tour Life, but it feels less like a part 2 and more like a full redo of the track. I can say that it's not bad, but that's mostly just by way of the original EXO Tour Life tune being good. Otherwise, I think Uzi really could have gone further with it, and it's a shame that outside of bonus tracks, Uzi's long-awaited second album ends almost the exact same way as his debut did with EXO Tour Life. So overall, much like Love Is Rage 2, Eternal Atake to me is a very bumpy ride, and I'm sure there are going to be several people that are disappointed by it because of the long wait. For me, I think it's perfectly fine. Nothing more and nothing less. It doesn't raise the bar, but it doesn't really lower it either. either. With Uzi's music, he doesn't really show much growth in terms of lyricism, so it's kind of up to the production and performances to make up the weight, and I would say there is some growth here in both regards. With the whole futuristic space theme of things, Uzi at least shows that he can grasp a concept a bit, and some of the production does play into that. Uzi's performances and vocals remain fun as you would expect out of him, but I think he still has the problem of taking a few too many detours into generic territory, and to me he still reads as being a bit inconsistent. I've said it already, but inconsistency was a big problem I had with Love Is Rage 2, and I have to say it's still very present here. Uzi loads up on tracks once again, and while I wouldn't say the album is totally a quantity over quality thing, I definitely think he could have cut down the number of tracks, and the album still is a classic case of there's a great 10 to 12 track album hiding in a slightly messy 18 to 20 track album. There's a lot of great things going on here, but there are a few throwaways that really bog down the album a peg. So all in all, I'm happy Uzi's back, and while this record could have been better, I'm not disappointed by it. It was a valiant effort, and I'm sure with a little more tightening up, Uzi should continue to show improvement with future albums. Hopefully we won't have to wait for them as long as we did with this one. My favorite tracks from this album were Baby Pluto, Lo Mein, You Better Move, I'm Sorry, Celebration Station, Prices, Urgency, Futsal Shuffle 2020, and That Way. And my least favorite tracks were Silly Watch, Pop, Homecoming, and Secure the Bag. Overall, on my rating scale, I'm gonna say that Lil Uzi Vert's Eternal Atake is gonna get an okay rating from me. It's not the greatest album I've heard. I don't think it's going to be album of the year material, but it's definitely better than the long delays might have led you to believe. I'm sure there are some tracks that are going to grow on me with this thing because Uzi does have a knack for making music that really grows on you, and I still definitely suggest that you check it out, Uzi fan or not, just to see which side of the fence you sit on. If nothing else, I'm glad the album is finally out. That way we can all experience it for ourselves and see what we think of it and what we get out of it. But that's just my opinion on this album. What did you guys think about it? Was it worth the long wait? Did the long wait leave you more disappointed in it? Have you just been indifferent to Lil Uzi and this album in general? And where would you rank it compared to Love Is Rage 2? For me, I'd say it might be a little bit above that. I'm not totally sure, but what do you guys think? Whatever your thoughts are, leave them down in the comments. Let's keep this civil and have some fun as we like to do. If you guys want to hit like and subscribe, thank you. If not, it's no big deal. I'm totally okay with it. And as for what's next, I believe next week is Niall Horan's new album. I will definitely give that a listen and try to review it, so stay tuned for that. But until then, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.